This is the Fan2Fan podcast, episode 5. Welcome to the Fan2Fan podcast. I am your host, Bernie Gonzalez. So this is the second part of my interview with artist and friend Jason Copland. Jason has done work for a number of different publishers, Marvel, Image, Boom, IDW, worked on quite a number of different properties from Daredevil to Robocop and quite a number of different indie and creator-owned comics. In the first part of the conversation, we had a bit of a reconnection. I'd interviewed him back in 2007. Hard to believe it was that long ago. And we were able to kind of go over everything that he's done since then as an artist, as a husband, and as a father. So it was a great conversation. Check it out. And this is part 2, where we continue as we go into a different slew of topics, including comic book conventions and digital comics. So let's get right to it. So with your artwork, what kind of tools do you use? Because I know you use inks and you use brushes, but I know you, like you said, you use computers to do some correcting after the fact.
Yeah, well, my process is always mutating. Sometimes I'll do roughs on paper, like my layouts and stuff, and then scan them in and then move them around and that sort of thing. And lately I've been doing a lot of my roughs in the computer. Like I have a Cintiq, so I'll just draw out stuff. Right now, that's sort of where I'm at. I'm doing the roughs in the computer. Much easier to make alterations and resize things and move things around than if I did it on paper, because you draw that beautiful hand and then realize that the hand is like half an inch too far to the left or whatever. You have to erase that hand and move it over. And if you do it in the computer, you just, get the lasso and just lasso it and hit V and then click, and it moves over and you didn't destroy the drawing. So I've been finding that doing the roughs digitally seems to work better in terms of getting a result that I like visually, but also being fairly quick, because it takes out the whole scanning aspect of it. So I've been doing my roughs digitally, but then I'll print. I have a large format printer, so I print out the roughs. I don't really pencil very tightly. That's pretty loose stuff. And then I'll just print that out in blue line on the actual board through it with my printer, and then I ink traditionally and then scan that.
So the looseness, since you're inking yourself, sometimes you feel like you don't have to necessarily draw all the windows in a building or all the buckles on a belt. You can kind of get that shorthand because you're giving it to yourself. Yeah.
I'm pretty confident that I'll fill in all the spots. Having said that, I use tons of whiteout. I am keeping the whiteout companies in business because I pencil so loosely. I tend to take a lot of the drawing is in the ink, and if something's not working, I just white it out and try to draw it again. I know the general area where a hand's going to go, or a general area of where an arm's got to go, and I just kind of go for it. And then if it doesn't work, I white it out and just go for it again. And eventually, I'll draw something that works for me, and then I move on. And I think that I like working like that because I used to make really tight pencils, and then I would go to ink them, and half the time I would destroy the tight pencil, and it would be more aggravating than liberating to ink. Whereas this way, if I usually have tight faces and hands, I'll make sure the hands and faces are really tight, or tightish anyways. And so I ink those fairly rigidly, but everything else, like folds in clothing, tons of background type stuff, I just kind of make up as I go. And then if it doesn't work, I white it out and just try to make it up as I go again. And there's some pages that are, haven't fairly naturally, and I don't use whiteout hardly at all. And then there's some pages that are just covered in whiteout, but that's part of my process. And I won't say I enjoy it, but at the same time, I don't shy from it. I think that making a mistake, because it's so loose when I go to ink, and I make a mistake, sometimes those mistakes are more interesting than the line that I would have drawn. So those mistakes stay. And then sometimes the mistakes get whited out. It's a pretty loose system I have.
So are you inking with a pen or with a brush?
Lately, I've been inking with nibs. Well, I've been inking with nibs pretty much my entire career, but more so now than before. I use brushes now mostly just for putting in heavy blacks, and maybe if faces are large on the page, I'll ink, certain things with a brush, just because it gets me a fatter line, and I don't have to go over a line a bunch of times to make it fatter. But mostly it's just nibs. Yeah.
And then you said you use gray tones or some washes for some commissions. I know you used the 2 tones for Kill All Monsters, kind of like a gray wash for that Mass and Monsters collection.
Yeah.
Is it just stuff that you just kind of keep adding to, your arsenal along the way, and when you need it, you can use it?
Yeah. The stuff that the gray scaling that I did for Kill All Monsters that's all done in the computer, and it's really fast, and it helps just kind of give the page a little bit of depth. I don't get too finicky about that grayscaling. And like I said, I haven't used the washes that much. I used it on the Mask and Monsters, but I haven't really used it in any other professional stuff. I'll do it, like I said, I'll do it for commissions because it makes the commission feel fuller. That's just not just a line drawing, but it's got some depth to it. Yeah, I'd like to actually start trying to use zip more. I've been noticing some artists using zip a lot, like Daniel Warren Johnson's been using zip a lot on his work, and it looks fabulous. And I usually would do zip in the computer, but I've been thinking more about doing it on the page, like getting actual zip tone and that sort of thing, but we'll see. I don't know.
Like a Bill Sienkiewicz, Ashley Wood, even Toby Cypress using actual X-Acto knife and putting the zip tones on there. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I'm glad you said Toby. I love Toby's work. He's awesome, and he's one of these guys that uses. It's crazy when you look at how he uses zip. It's almost like an abstract expressionist sort of use of zip. Sometimes it's just like a square of zip tone floating in the sky. Like, it's like, what is that? Like, if you really stopped and looked at it, it just kind of, sometimes they don't really mean anything. They're just the shape. And I really like that. I think that he takes lots of great chances. And it's exciting to look at his work. It's something new all the time, I think.
Those guys, and then I know you mentioned Frank Miller. Who are the guys, your touchstones? Like I know Sin City you mentioned, but Walt Simonson, Frank Miller. I think on social media every other day you're posting something about Ronin.
Yeah.
So, I think it's safe to say there's a Ronin tattoo somewhere on your body.
No, I am tattoo free currently. I've never had a tattoo, but I've been thinking about it. But it's not Ronin that would be on my body, strangely enough. Yeah, no, Frank Miller, the Ronin, I always have to say this, that Ronin, I think, is the greatest comic ever created. Mind you, I haven't read a lot of foreign material. I'm not really up on manga and that sort of thing. I have a few manga series that I've read, but when it comes to comics, I'm usually just a North American comic book reader. So when I say that Frank Miller's Ronin is the best comic, it's more the comic that I've read. I don't want to put anyone else's work down that I haven't read yet, but that's definitely the book. If I could point to a book that is probably the most influential book, it would be Ronin. Yeah.
Do you own any of the original artwork for it?
No, he only ever sold the first issue. He kept all of the other issues. And I saw, and I'm still kicking myself, but I was broke at the time. I saw on eBay a 2-page spread that was up for auction. And at the time it was like $2,500 US. I don't know what it eventually went for, but at the time it was like, well, I can't even afford $2,500. So, but if I had the money, if I was rich, that would have been I would have owned that. But unfortunately, I wasn't rich and I don't own it.
You do quite a few cons. I mean, I've seen you at C2E2. You do Heroes Con, Emerald City Comic Con. Have you ever done like San Diego?
I've never tabled at San Diego. I haven't been to San Diego since 2007, I think. It was a horrible, horrible experience, and I swore I'd never go back. So, and that was just me wandering around. I wasn't trying to sell anything or anything, but it was uncomfortable. I didn't enjoy it at all. And it's way too long. Just like Emerald City just finished, and it's a 4-day convention now. And 4 days is just too long. Yeah, it's just too long. I think 3 days is even too long sometimes. I don't do that many shows, though. Maybe 2-3 a year in the States. And I'll do usually 1 or 2 in Canada. But I don't travel too much, thankfully.
You just keep it local?
I try to, yeah. Seattle and Portland, we do those ones, and then I usually do an Eastern-ish one once a year. So I'll do Heroes, or I'll do I did Baltimore. Oh yeah, C2E2. I haven't done anything in New York. It's just too expensive, and people say that I should go to New York, but if I ever go to New York, it would be like a family vacation added on there somehow, so that everyone like Jackie and Stu get to go, and we can be tourists, and I could do a little bit of comic book stuff, but then mostly be a tourist and kind of see the sights and stuff. Because I probably would get there once, and then that would be it. I wouldn't go back again.
Is that part of the budgeting that you and your wife talk about? I guess maybe early in the year, the conventions that you'd like to go to, on your own or even together as a family, but just kind of figuring out, if we're going to do these conventions, this is what it's going to cost, so we can kind of plan it out for the whole year. Yeah,
usually our summers are pretty jam-packed with stuff. If I ever think about doing a show, I have to kind of plan it well in advance.
I noticed on social media that you had a post where you were talking about post-convention depression.
Mm-hmm. I usually take at least a day to kind of get over just the whole drama of it in my brain. It's one of those things where I wander around and I see all these people doing all this great work, and it's kind of like what we were talking about getting studio space with other artists. You look around, you see everyone doing all this stuff, and then you get back to your studio and you kind of look around and you just think, what am I doing? Like, what's going on? And it usually takes me a couple of days to sort of shake that whole vibe off and get back to work. So, yeah.
Well, that's on top of the whole convention hustle where, especially if you're doing a 3-day one, and some of the Wizard World conventions are now 4, kind of like, it just takes up your time where you're there setting up, you're kind of getting into a different headspace where you're dealing with people and trying to be more of a pitch man, trying to sell your stuff than you are being an artist.
Definitely. Yeah. It definitely pushes me out of my comfort zone in terms of social interaction. I don't dislike it, but it definitely is a drain on, my personal energy. It usually takes a few days to kind of get back into shape mentally. Going to shows, I think, is a healthy thing for a career, for one. Like you need to get out there and interact with other people and see what's going on, and and even just connect with people on a personal level that you don't even have to talk comics, just talk about whatever's going on, life, and kind of get to know people and build out those relationships, and so that it's not always just about comics. I think that's key to going to these shows, is to make sure that it's not just about your brand and you trying to expand your brand. It can be about that, but it needs to be more, or not more, but it also needs to be about making personal connections with people that work within the industry as well.
So now when you're attending conventions and, you get to go out there, chat with folks, do you find you have to put on the business hat on maybe after the show is done at the bar, at a restaurant, and try to, at least, rub shoulders with maybe another artist, another editor, just to, at least grease the wheels for a future job or to get something in the pipeline?
No, I don't really do that. Maybe a couple years ago, I definitely would hustle, definitely more than I do now. I think that was one of the nice things about this Emerald City is that we actually took an evening with some friends, and we went and spent an evening just in one of the hotel rooms playing board games, and we didn't even go to the bar. That was a lot of fun because it was about social interaction outside of comics and pitching, what are you doing now? And, can I work with you? And that sort of thing. It was just the ability to kind of shut out the whole game, as it were, the industry, and just kind of connect with people on a real level, where you weren't trying to sell each other stuff. And, it was nice. It definitely was something that I wish I could do at every show that I go to, just gather a group of people and be social in a non-bar situation.
And just play some good board games.
Yeah. And just, be friends and not worry about, who's standing over there talking to so-and-so and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, the hustle part, maybe it's because I kind of have work lined up till essentially this time next year. I don't feel like I need to hustle. I think just being myself and being out there and doing the work and hitting deadlines is sort of all I need to do right now.
I know you're working with Fabian Rangel Jr. on Santos for Stela.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Stela, because I know them as the different format as far as comics are concerned. But how'd you get involved with Fabian, with this project, and with Stela?
Well, it essentially come down to Jim Gibbons. He was an editor at Dark Horse, and we would chat at shows and such. And then when I was at and then he left Dark Horse, and he was doing something very secretive, and he wasn't allowed to talk about it. And so I was at Rose City last year, and he came up and he was just like, "Oh, I'm working at this place. It's actually called Stela." So he's like, I work for Stela, and we're looking for pitches and stuff. And so he came to my table and was just sort of like, what are you working on, sort of stuff. And Fabian and I were talking about doing pitches, and we actually put a pitch together. Excuse me. We put a pitch together, and so I said, "Oh, well, I'll send it to you." And it ended up not being the one that they chose, but it kind of got the ball rolling. Fabian and I were already sort of looking to do something together, and Jim was interested in both of our work. So it was just sort of, great timing and just kind of being in the right place at the right time, I guess. So
the different format they're using, so traditional comics kind of moving left to right. So this is scrolling upwards.
Yeah. It's like, your natural instinct when you're looking at Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you do the little thumb flick up. And so you're scrolling, and it's that. So they've built the app around that motion, and it's just feels really intuitive, and it takes the guesswork. Some people don't know how to read a comic. They get confused. Well, which panel do I go to next, and which bubble do I read next? The format for Stela is pretty straightforward. Like, you can't really read it incorrectly. So I think that's something that is a real strength. It being on your phone, accessible on your phone, and using the same swiping motion that everyone would be familiar with, like I say, Facebook or Twitter or whatever. So it just kind of all adds up. It's I think it's a format that you can do a lot of really cool stuff with.
How's it been from the artistic perspective? Has it changed your method at all, or how you think as far as laying out a page instead of moving, left to right, having the inertia move into traditional comic format where you're kind of moving up and down?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's, the first chapter actually was semi-painful for me because I was trying to wrap my head around the whole idea of how to present stuff. One of the main things that I like to use wide panels. In comics, from time to time, I like to use wide panels to dictate a pace and that sort of thing. But on a phone, you can't. It only goes as wide as the screen, and which isn't very wide. And so, I had to kind of rethink layout wise. Gone are the widescreen panels, and you have to kind of deal with an up and down situation, lots of verticals. And so it was a bit of a struggle for sure for the first chapter. And I don't think that I necessarily took advantage of sort of the infinite canvas nature of the scrolling. But by the second chapter, I was definitely much more comfortable with it. And I think that I'm taking the format and kind of running with it now and feeling a lot more comfortable dealing with with that whole scrolling nature. I think it's starting to feel comfortable. Yeah.
I'll say I've seen some of the Stela comics so far, and they're kind of covering all the different genres out there, but it seems like it's a really interesting format that kind of, like you said, it's a good canvas, it's an open canvas, but that you could, especially for action scenes, that you could keep things moving. If you had somebody scrolling up or down a building, you could play around with the action as well, so that the person is kind of moving things along, but they're adding a sense of speed, a sense of movement to it, but on a very natural basis. Yeah,
for sure. There's a title. It's like Gratuitous Ninja. It's like Gratnin. I think it's Gratnin. And the most recent chapter, there's a thing that he does with the infinite canvas thing where this person's running and then gets kind of thrown in the air but it's like this long, like taking advantage of the whole scrolling infinite canvas idea. And it's just done like as I'm scrolling through, I'm just like, holy, this is awesome. Like this is something that you just couldn't do on a page, on a comic page. He took the format and he just ran with it, and it just worked out phenomenal. So when things like that happen in some of these stories on Stela, I just it kind of makes me jealous. Like, I wish I thought of that. That's pretty cool. But it's nice to see a wide range of genres and styles and content. I think Stela's really building an interesting stable of titles.
I'll be back with Jason in just a second. Just a quick reminder, the Fan2Fan podcast is available in the iTunes store. Just search Fan2Fan. If you have a few seconds, please rate and review the podcast. It will get it out to more folks and let them know that we are having a lot of fun here talking about movies, TV, cartoons, comics, anything pop culture, and I will greatly appreciate any review that you leave, good, bad, or ugly. Also, please leave comments on there as well. That'll give me an idea for future topics. I have quite a number of them lined up, a lot of episodes that are ready to go, so I'm going to keep this going for a while, but iTunes reviews will help get it in the eyes of others.
And now, on with the show.
Do you buy comics digitally a lot? Is that something that you've been doing even before starting to work with Stela?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't buy a lot. I definitely have, I don't know, maybe like 200 or something on my iPad of issues. But yeah, I've been kind of buying stuff whenever they have a decent sale. I'll buy a big chunk of a certain book that I'm interested in. I just bought all of the fade outs They had like a 99-cent sale, so I ended up buying all the issues of that, which is phenomenal. I really enjoy that. Well, I like anything that Sean Phillips draws. I think he's fabulous, and he's always kind of pushing that sort of idea of loose and tight all at the same time. And it's something that I kind of try to get in my work, is for it to feel like it's tight, but using really loose line work and stuff. And I think he really nails kind of what I would be going for if I could be as good as John Phillips.
Well, no, I remember when Criminal first came out, it was it hit a chord, because I've always liked a lot of those 70s crime caper type movies, and Point Blank was one of the movies that I always loved, and I thought, oh, he's inspired by all of this, so he's already got me on board. But the artwork is amazing.
Yeah. Sean Phillips has always been somebody that I've kind of gravitated towards.
So since you've bought comics digitally, this is something that I know that has changed on my end now that I've made comics almost exclusively digitally, only available online and not in print. Has it changed the way you draw at all? The way that you make a page?
Am I conscious of how it will look as a digital comic?
I guess, yeah. Like, do you find that you maybe put a little less detail, more detail to, like, are you changing the way you draw because you know that the end product is going to be digital, that it's not going to be in print?
Yeah, Stela is a tough one because it's, you're seeing it on the phone at one scale, but you can also look at it on the iPad, which is a whole nother scale, because artwork generally is reduced. You draw it at a certain size, and then when it goes to print, it gets reduced usually by like a 66% of original. It's usually reduced by like 33% or something. So things get smaller, and details wouldn't necessarily get lost, but they're harder to see things that are wrong. When things get shrunk, things become a little more tighter and a little less out of proportion. Whereas it goes the opposite when it gets bigger. Things tend to, if you have a wonky arm, when it gets bigger, it just looks like the guy's like a mutant, like he's got some weird bends and stuff. So I've had to be a little conscious of how I draw, knowing that if people are looking at the Stela stuff on an iPad, it's going to get bigger and will look a little bit, I wouldn't say stranger, but it's a different way of looking at something that normally should be reduced, but it's actually getting bigger, which is kind of odd. So I have kind of been fighting with that whole notion of sort of drawing one image for two separate outcomes. And I don't know if I found exactly the right size of line and stuff for it, but I'm feeling pretty comfortable right now with what I'm drawing and how it will be seen.
How far are you into the stories?
About not halfway. I'm about a third the way through. Ours is 11 chapters, and I'm about halfway through chapter 4. So
it's kind of hard because you think, traditional comic format, I can say, oh, how many pages? And then you could say 22, but how long are some of these, are the chapters so far?
Well, the way that they've kind of planned this out is they're in 8, what would traditionally be 8 pages, and then 4 screens per page. So a chapter of a Stela book is generally about 32 panels, but then some screens have multiple panels within those, and some panels are longer, depending on how you want, certain transitions and things like that to happen. But generally, you're looking at probably about 40 panels, which is about the equivalent of 8 regular pages.
And are you still drawing on regular comic book size paper, so still 11 by 17?
Yeah, but I just blow up the panels slightly larger than they would be because I don't have to worry about gutters and bleeds and stuff like that. I know the dimension of the screen, so I know exactly what I'm going to, because you don't have to worry about print. When you're in print, you have to have the extra bleed and trim areas in case it shifts when it's printing. Whereas the Stela stuff, you know exactly the dimensions of the screen, and it's not going to change. Nothing's shifting. So I can make all the screens on the page bigger, knowing that I don't have to worry about any bleeds or anything like that.
So Fabian Rangel Jr. is writing it. Can you share who your colorist is? Do you know who your colorist is?
Yeah, his name's Doug Garbark, and he's been doing some stuff, I believe, at I want to say Marvel. He's been doing some work at the Big Two. So we're really thrilled to have him because he's awesome, and he really meshes with the way I draw. He's been dealing with it very flat color wise, not a whole lot of gradients and things like that, which I think really fits with the way I draw. So I'm excited about that.
I was going to say, how is that process? Because on my end, I do the pencils, the inks, the coloring, and, any like final design work. So when you're working with a colorist, how does that feel? Because, on some end, you're kind of surrendering some of your artwork that you've invested in. And, it probably weighs a metric ton from all the whiteout that you've used on it. But, you're just kind of scanning it and giving it up and kind of trusting that the colorist can bring it to life.
Yeah. Well, that's what comics is, man. That's the collaboration. You just have to trust the people that are part of your team. We actually asked for Doug. Doug did the pitch that Fabian and I did before we got the Stela stuff. Doug did the coloring for that, and it was some of the nicest coloring on my work that I've seen. So it was one of those things where it was like, well, when they asked us, who do you want to color? It was kind of a no-brainer to ask Doug to be part of it. So, I kind of knew going in what Doug brought to the whole team, and knew that, I was in pretty good hands. So it's not sort of like an X factor. You just kind of put it out there and hope that they put somebody on the book that knows how to work with my work. We knew it was Doug, and we knew that he knows what he's doing in terms of dealing with what I do. So, it wasn't scary at all. It was, I don't worry about it. There's other times though that when you put it out there and you don't know who's actually going to work on it. You don't know if they're going to understand what I drew. Half the time you don't even really have, you don't have an interaction with the colorist. You send it away, and the editor sends it to whoever they're going to get it colored by. And then you see it when it comes to print. And that's sort of like, well, all right.
And do you have any other pitches that are out there floating with publishers, or some other secret projects you're working on that you can't talk about, but you can at least allude to?
Well, I'm still working on Kill All Monster stuff. Michael and I have, we're doing a big omnibus book through Dark Horse. So that will all get collected. I'm doing 180 new pages plus the Dark Horse Presents story. Yeah, plus the Presents, plus the second half of The Ruins of Paris, and then a 40-page one-shot that no one's seen yet either. So the book will be about 340 pages or something, and it'll be a hardcover book. Yeah, it feels pretty good. I think the things that I have lined up, I'm pretty excited about, and I just hope that it continues to be, things that I'm looking forward to drawing. There's nothing worse than not looking forward to drawing something. Even if you're getting paid for it, it's much, much better when you are enjoying what you're going to draw. I think that's one reason why I don't really look to do a whole lot of Big Two stuff, because I'm not really that interested in superhero comics. I like the idea of drawing for them. But it's, now that I've done an issue of Daredevil, that was kind of a holy grail thing for me. I like a bucket list thing drawing Daredevil for Marvel. And since I've kind of done it, the fire's gone out a little bit about, tracking down a Marvel editor and saying, hire me. So, and DC, I don't want to draw any of their characters other than Batman. And even then, whatever. I can do it in commissions and stuff, and I'm more than happy to draw that. But yeah, I think that, loving what you draw, it comes through on the page. And I think that creator-owned stuff is really where, that's where my heart is. And I think that that's where my better work will probably come out of.
I'd say that's the one great thing about comics today. And I mean, it's something that's been evolving for a while, but you don't have to draw one of the big two books as an artist. You can make a decent living drawing a creator-owned book, keeping more of the money. I mean, I guess it's no different than an artist, a musician selling their first CD out of their van, and at least, they can keep the $5 or $10 and not necessarily working for a big company. And, the CD that was selling for $10 at the radio store you were working at, well, then again, it might have been vinyl, but still, the $10 that they're selling.
I'm not that old.
The artist is still, not that old, but the artist is only keeping $1 or $2 out of it. It's still better for them to just sell it out of their van for $5.
Yeah, there's a certain legitimacy when you work for a big two company. People definitely pay more attention to me when they found out I was drawing a Daredevil issue than doing Kill All Monsters, because I've never heard of Kill All Monsters, so whatever. But I've heard of Daredevil. Oh my God, Daredevil, that's awesome. So there's a certain excitement that gets attached to you as a creator when you're doing that sort of work. But it's just not necessarily where I want to be in terms of career. Having said that, if they came to me and said, do you want to draw Daredevil? I'd say yes in a heartbeat. But if they said, hey, do you want to draw Spider-Woman? I'd be like, no, I don't want to draw Spider-Woman. And I would probably turn them down. But, doing creator-owned stuff is awesome. But at the same time, it can get lost in the shuffle, and some people, like comic book readers or the comic book industry, kind of see it as a lesser than working for the big two, which isn't necessarily the case. It just is just sort of a perception thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the idea. So you guys kickstarted Kill All Monsters, and so you guys are definitely not strangers to crowdsourcing. And then you started your Patreon page. Was it just earlier this year?
Yeah, it was like a month ago. I haven't actually done anything on it yet, but because just the way timing went, we went on a family vacation and then some cons. So I've been kind of struggling to make sure that my Stela stuff is all on time. And so the Patreon thing has kind of gone on the back burner just for now, just because I'm trying to catch up. But yeah, the crowdsourcing and the Patreon thing is definitely something that I think kind of I won't say levels the playing field, but it allows people to do passion projects that that you manage to get the support to do these things that you probably wouldn't be able to do without people's support. And that's a pretty exciting thing.
Well, it kind of turns around the accessibility we were talking earlier. If you can go to a convention and talk to Scott Snyder or Eric Larson, now Eric Larson and Scott Snyder can turn around and talk to their audience directly. And instead of needing a Marvel or a DC, they can use Kickstarter or Indiegogo or a Patreon page to tell the stories they want to tell with the audiences basically, directly involved in that process. So I guess another good thing about the comics industry is that, it's collapse. Sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse, but it's definitely different than most other places, especially creative venues.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Yeah.
So website, jasoncopland.com, COPLAND.
Yep.
At Jason Copland.
Yep.
ComicConArt.com, and I think they just search your name and they'll find covers, pinups. I know you have some stuff there from Guardians of the Galaxy, Pop, Robocop, Murder Book. One of my favorites, the Massive Monster stuff. So lots of original art there.
Yep. Yeah, just about everything except for my Daredevil pages. I kept those.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all she wrote, man. Anything else you want to say?
Not really. No, I think I've blabbed enough. But it was a pleasure, man. Nice to talk to you again.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the second part of my interview with Jason Copland. If you did not listen to the first one, you can find it at fanpodcast.com along with new and old episodes. You can download the podcast from the iTunes Store and just about any podcatcher app you can think of, Overcast, TuneIn, or Stitcher. And on Facebook, find us on Fan2Fan Podcast, Twitter at Fan2Fan Podcast, FAN2FAN. So if you're on social media, please reach out, friend us, like us, retweet, share, and as always, please share the podcast with any fellow fans that you think may enjoy these conversations. Till next time, again, thanks for listening.
Now stand absolutely still while the cosmic divisor does its work.